only Allah can judge them, not anybody else here. Nobody, none of you guys can judge anybody or what they are, they're gay, whatever, what it is.
I'm not judging them, I'm judging the act.
No, but you say this, what is the act? Same thing with Christianity and Messianics, like you say the same
what
thing.
I'm saying is sexual sin, right, is a sin.
But Christianity again.
If you don't follow my religion, then you will go to hell.
You know, my religion and Christianity, I always reference the Bible because that's the book that we're supposed to read. And in the Bible it says, Jesus says this, he says, there is no way to the Father except through me. So when I read that literal, as in you can't get to heaven, you can't get to the Father who owns the kingdom of heaven except through me, who is Jesus. And so when you ask the question, if you don't follow my religion, will you go to hell? I think that it says it clearly right there.
People always look at, when Christians have this belief that we have, it's a matter of being like, oh, you're going to heaven, oh, you're going to hell, as far as it's a punishment from God. No, you chose not to believe in God. And so it's actually an act of God's kindness to say, if you don't want to be with me, then I'm not going to force you to be with me. Like, there's another place for you, but there's no purgatory. So there's no middle ground, gray room, lawn chair with a newspaper. It's heaven or hell. And so God is saying, if you don't want me, then I'm not going to force you to want me.
I don't have a heaven or hell to put anybody in. I'm not God, right? It's our belief that everything that we experience in this life that is good comes from God. Hell would be the absence of anything good and the God that makes it good.
Right. It says in the scriptures that the goodness of God leads to repentance.
That's right.
And so we need to be focusing on not whether we're going to hell if we don't follow the law, right? But it really is about enjoying the fruits of life and the abundance of who He is, and making the most of our time here by, sharing the gospel and, making disciples of all nations.
As Christians, our approach is to always lead in love. And I don't think I think a lot of us are learning how to, but I think that that's what Jesus charges us to do, because even with that vein of judgment, it's an identification that if you don't believe in Jesus, then hell is where you go. Now, it is not on us to say, you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. We're actually supposed to be like, you want to go to lunch? You need a hug? Let's go get coffee. And I feel like for me, I always feel the charge to reassure people that Jesus loves them, because He does, and He loves you before you were even on this earth, because He formed you. And so even in you not choosing Him, He always chooses you. And it actually is vexing that you choose not to choose Him.
Preach.
Because it's like, I love you so much, like I created you, and I wish you knew how much I cared about you. And so it's important for us as Christians to operate in that vein. We're not here to judge, we're not here to condemn, and we're not excelling anybody out of anything. It's just a matter of identifying what Jesus says it is and what it's not.
You have to disagree, step forward.
Relax, sir.
Follow it up. Christians clearly believe. We disagree with the content of your belief. That's different, though. That's not the fact that you believe in God. I don't think you ask a Christian, do you believe in God? They say no. Same thing for Jews. So I just think, just from the basis of our religion, it's just a wrong position to take, that if you're not a Muslim, you're going to go to hell.
But could that be based off of your moral stance as a person? Because, and I could be wrong, let me know if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a text in the Quran that talks about if a Muslim sins and is in hell, then Allah will replace them with a Jew or a Christian in their place. That's a hadith? Okay.
Yeah, that's a hadith. And it's weak. It's weak in terms of that's a whole field of study, but no, that's not a teaching of our Quran. Yeah.
I just want to follow up with, there's a lot that was said about Christ is the only way. And my wife, who she grew up Christian, mainly her whole life, when she reverted to Islam, one of the biggest things that she said to me was, I feel like I'm in religion, in my life, that I'm able to follow Christ better. In Islam, it's pointing back to Christ. There's nothing that's not pointing back there. If you read the Quran, it's the stories that's in the Bible. And as a matter of fact, in the Quran, it says that the Torah and the Gospel were revealed by God, by Allah. So it's not, if the idea is you have to go through Christ, we're not void of that. Now, is Christ God, is Christ prophet? That's where, through Christ, that's where everyone debates on what that means. But there's, the Quran is not separate from the idea that the Torah and the Gospel came. Moses is the most mentioned prophet in the Quran. So ultimately, that's why I think when you say if you're not with my religion, well, even in Christianity, there's a plethora of different ways people approach religion as far as Christ. There's so many different type of denominations. There's thousands of understandings of God. So when you say religion, it's kind of like, well, mathematics says 2 + 2 can equal 4, 1 + 3 could equal 4, 4 + 0 could equal 4. And we can all argue about who has the right formula, but if we pay attention, we can recognize that there's different ways to get to the same answer. And sometimes when you say religion, there's just a different way to go about it. God, Allah, these are languages. You get what I'm saying? So ultimately, I feel like what I love about Islam is that it's not running away from Christ. It believes that it's more clarifying Christ. The Quran's written in a way, with the Bible, with all the different types of Bibles there are, with Constantine, King James, with just the different people who've got their hands on it. The Quran, and no disrespect, but the Quran, what I love about it is that the original Arabic text is right there. That's just one thing that's just like, okay, if all else fails, just in translation alone, you can lose things. And then on top of that, one word in English can mean so many different things in Arabic. So there's footnotes at the bottom for the scholar to explain historically.
What they're saying.
Yeah, just, and I just respect that idea of when you're going to talk to me about someone who is important as Christ, explain yourself at the bottom, have the original text there for us to verify through. The Quran is written in a way to be able to protect Christ's word. And so ultimately, I believe when you say religion, I think it is a judgmental thing because we're not sure what is following Christ exactly.
But how does one that practices Islam, how do they get to heaven or hell? Like, what is the way?
Most people are living in a world of myth. That's not really, that's the way that religion is taught. Like, do good, go to heaven. Be bad, go to hell. When you actually look at, and I've read from Christian scholars like N.T. Wright as well, that they've talked about this, that really, when you look at the scripture, it's all about, Adam was put on the earth to cultivate the life on the earth. And he went wrong on the earth, and the kingdom will be established on the earth.
Can I correct you real quick? He was put in the Garden of Eden, not the earth. But
That was on the earth.
I don't think so. Not from what I believe. I don't think the Garden of Eden was on earth because when he got.
Well, see, you're saying I'm just quoting them.
I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it was. That's fine. It was high. That's why the rivers came from it, because it was elevated. But it was a part of the earth. We've forgotten that we're supposed to make our life on this earth better. So like in Jewish tradition, for example, like in Islamic tradition, every time a man marries a woman, it's a replication of the garden. It begins in our home. We believe that those children, like one of our teachings is that heaven lies at the foot of mother, because those children that are under her care, that is paradise. They're heavenly. They don't come here. Now, this may be a difference with you, but from our view, they don't come here wanting sin and say, let me get some beer. They're good people. Have you all ever seen that? I mean, they come, they're sweet, they want to be loved, they want to give love. And our job is to cultivate that, create an environment that allows for that to grow and flourish, and ultimately extend that to the world. So how does that happen? The same values that most of us get when we're children, be respectful, don't lie, don't steal.
Don't drink, do that, yeah.
All of these things that I think everyone kind of knows. It creates an environment, or it has the capacity and the potential to create an environment for human beings that is heavenly. What happens after we die is the result of that.
I can't get down with Islam. For me personally, the reason why I can't accept it is because there's no guarantee of salvation. And so I can be
really quick. What do you mean when you say that?
When I say there's no guarantee of salvation, I'm saying that I can I can stand before Allah as a model Muslim, and he can choose, because of my sinful nature, he can choose to still send me to hell. That's what I've read out of the Quran. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You could reject that premise entirely. But for me, I can't. With Christianity, the guarantee of salvation is in the personification of Jesus Christ, his death, burial, and resurrection. Yeah. And like I said before, I mentioned that verse from Corinthians, he that knew no sin became sin so that we might become the righteousness of God. That tells me as a Christian that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to try to be perfect. I don't try to be like Christ because he's asking me to. I'm trying to be like Christ because that is the best way to be. Just as a blanket statement, it's the best way to be. It's the best way to be loving, to be kind. In Galatians 5, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. There are people who are not Christians that operate that way. So I'm not saying that that's unique to Christianity. Any Christian worth their salt would say, no, it's not a religion, it's a way of life, it is a lifestyle, it is a relationship. Yeah. That's a buzzword. I know you've heard Christians say like, it's a relationship, it's not a religion. But if you're truly walking with Jesus, you understand that it is in fact a walk with a friend. Yeah. And the more you walk with that friend, you become like him.
I first and foremost believe that none of us have really truly seen God in his form, like God and who his true form is. And I can't believe anyone who is a monotheist would see God and deny him. And when I think of it that way, I think of it in the context that also when you think about it, the way that the stories are brought across, right? Like a lot of these stories start in the Middle East per se, right? And it storms out into different specks of the earth. When you think of it that way, there's people who have never heard the gospel, they've never heard the Torah, they've never heard the Quran, they've never had any knowledge of these things, but they have a feeling that there is a God. I don't personally believe that that person is going to be condemned to hell. There's so much that we can only fathom so much from the scriptures of the word, and I think that's why it was revealed in Hebrew, in Aramaic, and in Arabic. There's also the Sumerian I'm still trying to understand, but even then when you try to take from Sumerian that goes to Hebrew, you could have a sentence that says, he jumped over the fence, and then you bring it all the way over into English, and that sentence is saying a whole different thing. That sentence is saying he drove his car over into the water. Like, this is just the way that language, broke it to the Tower of Babel, how all these languages work, it's just like that, and I think that there's a level of intent that I think that is there, and I think that's the beauty of the perfection of God.
My religion does more for the black community than the other.
When Islam makes its presence known to the black community, primarily through the Nation of Islam, first and foremost, that's when we begin to see certain critical changes, such as our even wanting to be called black. We didn't even want to be called black once upon a time.
Sure.
We didn't even want to look like ourselves. So there was a hatred of ourselves, no fault of our own, to be fair, but the proper medicine to relieve us of that ill. We don't see the process, that process taking place until the coming of the Nation of Islam. Even someone like James Cone, who sort of structured or put together black liberation theology, he openly admitted it. He said, look, we knew Malcolm and those guys were right. So I had to create something. He says it like this. I had to locate, I had to find the message of Christ speaking to black people. And essentially, now this is with due respect to him as a great theologian, all he did was just restructure Nation of Islam arguments. When we look at the church, we can see great efforts, but most of those efforts, from our view, have to do with assimilation. But every great movement to stand us up as a people, as an independent group of standing in our own dignity and sense of value and worth, I've seen it come from Muslims.
First thing I'm gonna say is there's a lot of faith and there's a lot of fact when it comes to stuff. And I think my faith is more determined off of the facts. I feel like if God gives us religion as his relationship to us as people, then that should cultivate your social construct, that should cultivate your understanding of politics, your education, everything that you are. There should be proof and evidence of what that word does for you. We didn't get a fair trial of that with Christianity because of the way that it was systematically put. We still fought through that and produced strong, beautiful Christians who did a lot for us. Harriet Tubman, I mean, that's my history too. It's not a Muslim Christian thing. That was a Christian woman who came and got us up out of there. So I don't even like the question in a way. However, like brother was saying, the critical thing of what Islam brought, it challenged everything head up. And it produced a reality for us that you can't run from. It actually helped the Christian conversation. Without Malcolm going as hard as he did, Malcolm creates a choice that makes them look at Martin, who they didn't like, and then they go, we don't like Martin, we won't do it, but we really don't like Malcolm, so we gotta do Martin. Because every time we hurt him and we do something against him and do something against them, then we send more towards the Malcolms and we send more towards this side. So what Islam did, especially through the Nation of Islam, is it gave us a pride about who we are as being black. It took us and decided that we could ultimately do so much together and that it could build us. And then it created a reality that worked with that. And I gotta say a name specifically through the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who through the 30s all the way to 1975 ran an unparalleled run. He got put in the jails for wars that we're dealing with right now. When World War II came, he was one of the first to be set in jail to even bring the Quran inside of jail. By the time he's coming out, he's got more of us off of drugs, more of us off of drinking, more of us pushing marriage together. And then he produced a Black Wall Street for us while we were here. He was just never credited. He created more world leaders out of us. He created culture for us based on where we were at and never really tried to deny that, the Christianity in us and the greatness in us, but to pull the best out of us for that. Yeah. By the time desegregation is coming and Elijah Muhammad is saying integration is a hypocritical trick, he was trying to tell us that there's nothing wrong with integrating, but there's things that have to be done before you do that. If they're set forward for hundreds of years and we're set down for hundreds of years, when we integrate, we're going to integrate like this. And after integration, we found ourselves in ghettos and hoods all across the country, but ultimately we didn't have the need to want to build what we already had because now we had already had the idea that we needed to be with them, that ultimately if we get to eat with them, we get to where we want to be at. Islam, by the way it was pushed through black people, was trying to counter everything that we eventually ran into. Every problem that we deal with today, it was fighting it and producing a reality to show that we can do this on our own and to give ourselves a certain level of respect. And to say that by the end of Martin Luther King's reign, he does the speech of I Have a Dream in 1963. Then he comes outside of that and we're getting integration, we're moving, but he starts to realize it is a hypocritical trick. They're not giving us no level of reparations. They're giving people out of Ireland land and all these different things, but they talked us into the idea that after everything we went through, we have been liberated because we can kiss white girls. Yeah. So now it's like, so then by 66, he meets with Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad tells him, we got to qualify ourselves and make them give to us what they owe us. He started changing his narrative. And from 66 to 68, Martin Luther King became a different kind of person. They murdered him. And then by the time we were born, they resurrected his name, but left it under the dream that he had in 1963, but not what he had gave us between 66 and 68 when he was marching back on Washington to get our check. Everything that even the reverends were finding out based off of what they were taught, Islam and the black Muslims constantly warned, constantly built, constantly tried to tell them that eventually we would become what we are in the 80s, drug babies, Crips, Bloods, Ratchets, still beautiful, but ultimately divided. Yeah, because, and last thing I want to say, from King, after he had spoke with Elijah Muhammad and had been around, I love what he said. He said, I found that it's not the KKK that is necessarily the biggest problem. It's the moderate whites who are more concerned with order than they are with justice. And that was the idea that we was trying to push across, was there got to be justice. Yeah. And now for what they used to do back then with Christianity is what we do in politics now. They use politicians to create order, but not to give us justice.
I think Christians, I think the slaves, the abolitionists, they got us free under the banner and the foundation of Christianity. I agree. I believe that. I also believe that the way that the Black church has continued, and not all Black churches, but I have to use this general sense, the way that the Black Big C church as a whole has moved forward, we have not been as sustainable as the Black Islamic movement. In Christianity as a whole, skin color and race is a way secondary conversation.
Islam as a whole, it is too. Just to say.
Sure.
But
sure.
our war was race here. We didn't make it that. They made it.
Right. I agree. The age-old Malcolm versus Martin, we have to, one, remember that they were both killed. They were both assassinated, right? For how they, walked out their lives and how they walked out their movements. They were both saying things that challenged the establishment. When we're having the conversation about Black church versus Black Islam within the communities, is that each one within their traditions are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist. I know this because I have family who are Muslims, and they come to every Thanksgiving and they skip over the ham. You dig what I'm saying? They ask if the greens got turkey necks or if it got ham hocks in it. You dig what I'm saying? Like they completely they skip over that, and nobody looks at them differently. When we're mostly Christian, so when we sit at the Thanksgiving table, we pray in Jesus' name. They bow their heads, and they're reverent of that. So for example, if you guys right now were to take Salat, right? Like I would bow my head, and I'd be respectful of that. I'm saying this as someone who also has been a vocational worship minister for 12 years. Like, the Black church has given me a place to live out my purpose, right? It's given me a place to live out what I believe is a calling from God.
I think both, in part, they do honestly like good things for the community, right? In whatever way we kind of value that. But I don't necessarily think we're there yet. That being said, I mean, we're still in the conditions that, you know what I'm saying? We're still in the poverty mindset. And then versus, in a spiritual aspect, when I see movements like the Nation of Islam, yes, they do a lot of great things, but me being a little bit biased in my perspective and my views, it's like, are they really in the right way? So it's hard to really decipher like what religion is doing good things because of how am I gonna value what that good thing is?
The levels of discipline and levels of infrastructure that I've been taught while being in Islam, the Quran speaks on for people within the faith. And those are things that tie a lot of what I want to see within the Black community. A lot of self-built infrastructure, a lot of self-discipline that helps build us as people. That's more so what I was thinking. And it's so, like we're all saying, it's so minute. I don't even really truly see it as like, oh, they did so much more than this, because we're all contributing our own way. And I think it's just only separation, I say, was a difference that I saw within the two. Was like, I did grow up, and again, this is super just personal. I saw a family member, I'd rather say, when they came born again. I saw how they were treated within the church, and they were not treated in a way, they were condemning things of her in a way I didn't see within like the Islamic faith. That's the only thing.
Where I'm from, there ain't as many Black people. I'm from Seattle, and so we probably have like a 3 to 4% of Black people. But within that, I've seen Black churches rise up for the community in ways I've never seen before. In Seattle, there was the late and great Reverend McKinney, who actually went to college and was close friends with Dr. Martin Luther King. And through Reverend McKinney, Dr. King came to Seattle, and they did protest, and they created centers and job opportunities for Black people so that there was opportunities for them. I think the reason why I lean more towards the Black church, outside of the fact that I'm a Black woman, a part of the Black church, is simply the fact that I've never seen the Black church do something for the Black community at the cost of discounting another community. Like, I think I look at the vein of which things are done in, and I think the Black church has always done it in the vein of we're aware that there's resources and things that we need that we're not being allotted systematically. So we're gonna provide that. And there's this, it's called the social gospel. It's like a practice that Dr. King subscribed to, as well as Dr. McKinney, which was that, like, how can we lead people to Christ if their bills aren't paid, if their car notes aren't paid, if they can't feed their kids? How can we lead them? What would make them want to even come to the church in the first place if all their natural necessities aren't met? And so in that way, that's where the Black church stepped in and was like, we're charged with the assignment and the obligation to meet those needs because we have those resources.
Oh my gosh, all those sad donuts got me feeling like it's nap time. You, hey, PA boy, get over here.
Oh, coffee, sir.
My goodness, what happened to you?
Just getting your triple shot macchiato with skim milk, and all of a sudden there was this crash. I ended up on the floor, I collapsed, and I'm in all this pain.
Okay, I've heard enough. Here's some advice, all right? Just know that if you ever find yourself getting injured, go to Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Morgan & Morgan specializes in a wide variety of personal injury cases and have won thousands of big cases. Just recently, Morgan & Morgan has secured verdicts of over $12 million in Florida and $26 million in Philly. That's up to 40 times the highest insurance offer. I'm telling you, your case can be worth millions. The best part, it's all free unless you win your case. If you've also been a victim of personal injury or any other serious accidents, you can visit www.forthepeople.com/Jubilee found in the description below to start your free claim today. Thanks to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this portion of this episode. Now, let's get back to the video. And me, I'll get to this triple shot macchiato. Skim milk? Let's try this. You're gonna make it far, kid. You're gonna make it far.
Homosexuality is a sin.
Yeah, I think that I agree with the prompt that homosexuality is a sin.
Oh wait, okay, no, I disagree actually.
Okay. Like most things that we've talked about, it's been politicized in a way that we look at homosexuality as like the worst thing you can do. And because you look at it in that certain like context and in that certain way, it's super easy to divide, right? It's super easy to divide people and say these people believe that gay people are going to hell. These people don't. I don't see, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong if you don't believe this, but I believe that the general Christian belief is that homosexuality is a sin, yes, but all sin are equal before God.
Yeah.
And so, and because of that, it's no more a sin than being a liar.
Yeah.
It's no more of a sin than being a murderer. It's no more of a sin than any other sins that we commit. For us as Christians, there is no sliding scale of what sin is. All of it is unrighteousness before God. God is holy, period. He has to judge it all.
Yeah.
So that's the Christian belief.
Islamic law is a little different.
Okay.
Without getting too technical, number one, there are grades. You have minor and major sins. So, but the term in and of itself, sin, how is it defined in our perspective? So the first thing, again, this is very general. What God says to do, and to do what he says do, or to perform what he says do, then that would be a good thing. To do opposite of what he says to do would be a sin. That's very general. But when we take a closer look at those things that he commands of us to do, they're not arbitrary. They don't serve, like they're not without purpose. So ultimately, everything that God commands us to do and avoid, they center on 5 things: the preservation of life, intelligence, lineage, property, religion. So, like for example, we can't engage in any type of intoxicant, solid, liquid, or gas. That's because it devalues or it affects the healthy functioning of our minds, let alone our bodies. So that's the preservation of intellect and life. Fornication is a sin. Adultery is a sin because that violates the sacredness of family
Legacy.
and lineage.
Yeah.
So homosexuality is seen as a means by which the sacredness, because it's not just lineage and family, the sex act in and of itself is how family life initiates.
Yes.
But not only that, I would add even further, it's sort of like a philosophical unfolding, because really, if we could sort of follow the logic to its conclusion, if we were to engage in the taking of life to the extreme, then there would be no people. I'm talking about murder. If we would allow for intoxication to just run rampant, no less is true with homosexuality. Most of these things that we consider to be major sins, if we look at them and we can sort of estimate what would the ultimate outcome be if this act was engaged in without any limits or boundaries, this would ultimately bring about the collapse of society.
So here's what the books say, because when you say the word sin, and we're talking about scriptures, right? So based off of the scriptures, it kind of made it pretty clear from what I've seen in the scriptures. Now, how I choose to operate and how I choose to move, that's determined on how I interpret it and how I understand it. So if you ask me a straight question, is it sin? Yeah, the book says that. Does it determine whether, if my brother is homosexual, that I don't love my brother? I don't determine that. It doesn't determine that if somebody starts, attacking us, that I ain't fighting for him. It doesn't determine that, I know the book says a lot about mercy. I know the book says a lot about grace and a lot of things. So for me, it's like, if you ask me a straight question, see, that's the problem where I think this country has shifted things a little bit, because then they'll, it's like, we'll all be like, okay, what I just said, I love him, so this is my people. No, I'm standing together. James Baldwin's my brother. What y'all want to say? He did more for me than a lot of people who claim to be Muslim, So, however, don't bully the pastor into marrying a same-sex couple if that's not his belief. That's where we got to split the line of he believes this based off of his book. So
thank you for
find
saying that.
somebody who wants to marry you, but don't bully people out of their beliefs. And that's the part where we have to draw the line and say, based off of the book, it is.
And I want to get into that. I think when it comes to, for us, for us, Islamic law is legal and ethical. So these are moral questions. They're not just questions of law. But one of the bases of how we analyze these issues is a teaching of our prophet. In English, his actions are judged by intention, or actions are by intention, and for every person is what he intends. I think that the question of, or just the statement in and of itself, is this act wrong? There's a black and white yes or no. But then there's an analysis of the circumstance of the person. They've done studies and they've discovered that so many people who engage in such and such behavior, they were the victims of sexual assault, sexual abuse. And I think that from the standpoint of mercy and loving human beings, because there's another teaching, none of you truly believes until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, like the golden rule. I think that oftentimes we as religious people in this society, well, maybe in the world, we're guilty of it. We're not merciful in looking at the conditions that have shaped people. So we kind of just draw from a black and white book of do's and don'ts without really taking the time and concern to know that human being. So that's I wanted to add that to what because it's not just law. And
the Bible says, do not despise my children, for there are angels for them that never leave the face of God. So like the way I interpret that is, do not despise my children. Do not hate on somebody for their sinful ways, because they have angels that never leave the face of God. They have angels professing to God about them, saying like, God, please allow this person into my kingdom or into your kingdom. I think that I stayed back because, I have very, very important people in my life who are in the LGBTQ community. And, as a man, I don't want to be like, oh, they're sinning. So in my thought process, homosexuality is not a sin in my mind that I was thinking. It's the act of being homosexual, if that makes sense. The sexual acts and stuff like that. So when he said no sin is greater than any other, so being homosexual, although it is a sin, it's similar to other sins, I was like, I have to go out there because I do believe that. And I think that sometimes people can get caught up in the idea that, Christians are hating on the LGBTQ community. That is not what that is. It's the fact that, I care for their souls. Because in the Bible, it also says the wages of sin is death.
Yeah.
Death. Like he said, flesh and blood will not go to the kingdom of heaven. Your soul is there. And that's something I'm passionate about, and I care about these people. Like I care about all you guys, and all your souls, because God calls for me to do that. So I think that this discussion, you know, again, has been politicized so much that we can't actually have real conversations like this. But you definitely like kind of like got me to come up here.
I think it's also. I appreciate you. I think also because of that, like there's this temptation to assume that Christians are self-righteous because we want them to be saved, right? Like, oh, you're self-righteous because you think you have all the answers, or anything like that, and that's furthest from the truth. Jesus says, like, why do you talk about the speck in your brother's eye when you have a log in yours? First, take the log out of your eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly that there's a speck in your brother's eye. I think what he's trying to say here, I think what Jesus is trying to say is neither one of you qualify for holiness. Neither one of you qualify for righteousness. And because I'm here, I'm being Jesus, because I'm here as the embodiment of holiness and righteousness and perfection, I have a righteousness that you don't have. And so the whole premise of Christianity and the whole premise of the gospel is culminated in 2 Corinthians, where he says, he that knew no sin became sin so that we might become the righteousness of God.
Yes, yeah.
I'm about to have my gay cousins mad at me. No.
Got about 7 of those.
So I want to say what I disagree with is the intent of the prompt and the narrative around the prompt. And I've done a lot of studying around different religion in general. It's different religion, and even I've done different practices myself. This is what I've come to the conclusion of. In general, of any sex that is outside of the intent of procreation, if you really look at it, it's a form of sin. It's either adultery, it's whatever it is, it's some form of sin. To put all of that and to put it to just homosexuality as a sin is what I disagree with. And I think it's a very targeted narrative, essentially. What was I about to say? If you really look at it, and I think it really gets targeted towards our communities. I wish the problem was the other way around, so I go forward to say this, because I'm very protective of both the Islamic and the Christian communities and the viewpoints of it. Because realistically speaking, if you think about a monk who goes by the same sexual laws, if you really think about it, they don't have any sex outside of the purpose of procreation. They are not, they're not attacked in any the same kind of way that Christians and Muslims are. At the end of the day, I see it as we do have, as we all know, like there's 4 angels that are with us, and there's a spiritual body within us, and our spiritual body can only grow through the practice of self-discipline. And sex in general is a form of temptation. It is a temptation, and it's literally at your root. It's literally like what some people believe they call the root chakra. It's literally, it stays at your base, and you can't grow outside of temptation. You can't grow in discipline with sexual acts, without fasting, things like that. So it's just to put it to all of this as to just homosexuality, and I can't stay with that.
Yeah. I look at that, like I heard what you said about the homosexual is not a sin, but like the sexual act. But same with Christian and Muslim, like let's be real, for real, some of them are performing sexual act. I know current Muslim, so that's why I disagree with that too. And also I have a friend who is a current Muslim who prays 5 times a day, does Ramadan, everything, and is gay. So I feel like what gives me the right to judge people or what they like, you know? It doesn't like, I know it's a sin, yes it is, but like only Allah can judge them, not anybody else here. Nobody, none of you guys can judge anybody or what they are, they're gay, whatever, what it is. Nobody can judge them. That's why I disagree with that situation.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think we're judging, though.
Yeah, I don't
think
I
we're
got a
judging.
question.
I think we are.
No, yeah, you are, because you said it's a
I
sin.
think
I'm saying it's a sin. I'm not judging that person. Like I said, do not despise my children. I do not despise them.
I'm saying
not
it's the
judging
same
them.
thing, but I look at the same thing.
God is the only one that can judge. I'm not judging them. I'm judging the act.
No, but you said this. What is the
Right,
act?
and I
Same
think-
thing with Christianity and Christianity. Like you say the same
What I'm
thing.
saying
Like,
is sexual sin right, is a sin.
But
Period, point
Christianity
blank.
can, you know, they can do sexual acts too, right?
So
We can't, not outside of
same with
marriage, not
Muslims.
outside of marriage.
Oh, really? They don't do that outside of marriage.
hold on.
No,
hold on,
okay,
hold on
so
real
in
quick.
Christianity,
Same with, you know, I'm not saying only Christianity and Islamic too. They
I understand, I'm
have
here with
sex
you.
out of marriage too, without getting married too.
Can you define?
True or false?
Can you define judge for us?
Huh?
Can you define judge?
Like
When you
judging
say-
someone, like trying to like put your own opinion on someone, like saying that it's a sin, like you're like making it seem like it's a thing where like how do I put it?
to condemn someone on the basis of their own opinion.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I'm just
yeah,
clarifying.
And I don't
that's
think
what-
we have
yeah.
the right to condemn.
Right.
Because that's what I was saying earlier regarding we don't know a
That's what
person's
I'm trying to say
circumstance.
too, yeah.
But I think we make judgments all the time. And I think that oftentimes, and I don't know if this is a modern American, Western cultural phenomenon, we've kind of shied away from religion. Religious people. If we're religious people, we live our religion on this earth. Religion was, as in our view, in Islam, the revelation comes, as it came to the prophets before, to show us how to actually live in this space and in this time. And it's not just to make us be in good condition for when we die.
Yeah.
But I think what it is it comes to is, because even technically we're not supposed to, I get what you're saying where we do judge, but even that is something we're not supposed to do as well,
Exactly.
right?
We,
And
we
I
are,
think
we
it's
are,
just
that
though.
my
We
point, what I
are.
was
We
trying to say.
actually have a law. We actually have a law. We have lawyers. We actually have, like, you can take somebody
but
to get
the thing is
for problems.
we're not
for
supposed to
issues.
judge or condemn. We're not the judge during
Yeah, it's not our
execution.
right to
But,
do that.
We go so much on the specific narrative of our books, of what we are taught.
Exactly.
And how many of us in here have really said to ourselves, okay, let me actually study this, not just in the initial language, the difference in speech of that time period. Take into account that there's intent with how this book is written for us to take on. What also is the reasoning and the intent of this being a sin versus this being moral? What actually comes down to this? Why is this study here? How many of us really
know, it's
study
true,
deep
understand.
in the history and the
Yeah.
theology?
Touch on that,
That's my
please.
point.
I want to say, off the basis of the question, the straight question is it a sin? I didn't hear no one in here say it's not. When you guys walked in, you said like, you gave a definition of anything outside of procreation, and it fell within that definition. So when I sat down, there was a yes or no answer that came in. I sat with, well, damn, you put me there. If they would have took something else and said it's fornication a sin.
Why are we singling them out? Why is the there's so much things we have not even learned. Like they're like, I know so much gay people myself, LGBT, in all forms of the spectrum, and a lot of them they ask, why am I this? There's so much questions of trying to understand, and I think we need to allow a space for gay people to just be them, and if science comes to a place of understanding why I was, not even just why they're born gay, but why I
So
am
you
born
reject the
straight.
premise
Why
of
was
the
I
problem.
also born straight?
I think that homosexuality is a unique sin, and I think that that's something that is maybe younger people or whatever. I'm probably not as young as you all are, but I can speak on behalf of Islam, and I'm not trying to say this is what I'm feeling. I'm saying that we make judgments. We have a system of belief. Now, individuals have their sensitivities. That's different. I'm saying this is what Islam says, and I'm not the one to condemn. Say, oh, you think that way as a Muslim? You're not. That's not what we're doing. But I think it should be clear that no, the religion is pretty straightforward on some. There's a lot of variation. There's a lot of room for difference of opinion. But there's some very straightforward positions that we don't really budge on.
The other side has more extremists than my side.
Yeah. Okay. They don't have more extremists than my side. The other side, if you're saying black Muslims, not at all. But when it comes to who's the power players of the world at the moment, it's America. America is the most powerful nation in the world, and they clone themselves under the idea of Christianity. Like I said, Christianity doesn't have extremists, but the way that they use that, they use that to make it look like Muslims are extreme, to be honest. So there's wars happening right now under many different, religious ideas, but this side in America is really good at pushing propaganda that makes them seem like they're fair seeming or like everything is okay. But unfortunately,
using the idea of Christianity. They pretty much have taken over the world in that regard. There's extremism in everybody. So I don't think there's such thing as a Christian extremist. I don't think there's such thing as a Muslim extremist. I just think there's extremists who are working for somebody else. But unfortunately at this time, I don't, dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 120,000 civilians with a snap. That's a big thing to just be able to do, and then to color over and just act like, oh, it's just war or it's just politics. So yeah, I do think that it was utilized in a very strong way, producing extremists. It just doesn't look branded as extremism. One of the first slave ships to come pick up black people in Africa was named Jesus. So a big part of what they did, if you look back at the KKK and the Ku Klux Klan, they were burning crosses. So they didn't separate it from the idea of religion. Now, there's the world and there's what's going on with the world. I'm black, or called a so-called African American. So what's happening with extremism in the world is what's happening in the world. I can only speak from my experience. And from my experience, they used Christianity more than they used anything else to tear us down and to burn us down. They used it through slavery. They used it through Jim Crow. That wasn't Muslims. That was white people under the disguise of Christianity. They pushed way more extremism with that than any other religion here.
I didn't step forward because I think that human beings are human beings, and human beings tend to go to extremes. Islam, Christianity, other things, Hinduism, you can look across the spectrum of history, you can look throughout the world today. Even secular ideas, they're always used as tools for people who are driven to extremes. So I think it would be unfair to say one side is more extreme than the other. I've met Muslims that scare me, their position, their thinking, their view of the world. And then I'm obviously, the history that Marquise just recounted is very important. I mean, my grandfather moved up from Little Rock, or outside of Little Rock, Forest City, to Chicago as a part of the Great Migration because of the extreme circumstances that our foreparents faced in the racist South. So, yeah, that's it. I think it would be unfair to say one side is more extreme than the other.
America specifically, though, I think when you remove the blinders, you're aware of what the agenda is. And I think, like you said, Christianity is the most used in a deceptive way that doesn't align with what we actually believe to cause all these negative and wicked things to take place in our society today. And I think that the reason why it's Christianity that's always pointed and demonized is because Jesus being the one and only true living God.
I think we have to take a look at what the outworking of that extremism produces, right? The two things that come to mind are 9/11, of course, right? But I hold that in tension because I've never seen, me personally with Muslims in my family, I've never seen a black Muslim be violent. I've just never seen it, me personally. I've seen black Hebrew Israelites be very violent and very aggressive, but I wouldn't consider them black Christians either, right? That's the first thing I think about. And then the second thing I think about is the Charleston 9 back in 2015, when Dylan Roof goes in and shoots up a Bible study. Like extreme action is predicated upon extreme ideologies, and that can be found anywhere. I wouldn't say that Muslims are more extreme than the others, but I would also say that you cannot find this level of extremism in the person of Christ as well.
And I want to clarify that.
Facts.
Whenever I'm speaking, that's why I like that the first question was what it was. It's never about what Christ did. I agree with, I don't know who said it, I'm sorry, but you talked about who he is and the power of he and why it's utilized. So to me, I'm pointing out that it is being utilized. Not him, but because of the importance of who he is, it became what they used to systematically put us where we're at.
Sure.
And they used that specifically. And so for me, it's not and then you use that to vilify. Right now, what we know about terrorism when it comes to Islam, we're not sure if we know the terrorism of Islam or if we know what propaganda was given to us about it. When you said 9/11, you know, there's questions around what really happened there, questions. But with it, okay, Iraq had nothing to do with it. We run there and start ripping them apart, find no weapons of mass destruction, you know, but that's not seen as terrorism. That's the problem. And the problem is that it's not put out as that, because the ones who teach us what terrorism is are the ones who can go against the rule they gave to us.
I'm here with you, and I understand what you're saying. I really, really do. But because of what they're saying, like the idea that Jesus is the one and the only truly way to get to God, if I was the devil, what would I use him as? What would I tell people? Oh, use God to do this, use God to do that, because then it starts to vilify Jesus from what you're talking about. Right. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. I find it interesting too that this question naturally is like, it creates division, right? And the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy.
That's right.
With that being said, I think at the end of the day, when we include conversations about like extremists and between like Christians and Muslims, at the root of it all, we're not discussing the core issue, in that we do have to love our neighbor, period.
Yes.
And if we're constantly pitting, you know, our beliefs against each other, oh, y'all are, you know, you weaponizing Christ in this way, I don't think that we could really come to a middle ground.
Women are as empowered as men in my religion.
I believe that women are empowered in Christianity because in every standard of which a woman is told in the Bible to come before her husband, in that same way, the standard is the same for the husband to his wife. And so when it says woman submit to your husbands, it's also talking about how a man is to take care and cover his wife because you're under submission to God. And so in the Bible, there's no allowance of us being abused. There's no allowance of us being disrespected. And so through my faith, I don't feel like as a woman, I'm put down, disrespected, or disregarded in any type of way.
In my personal journey, I grew up under Crips, Bloods, Pimps, Thugs. And I grew up in a community where, especially in Islam and in the blackest Muslim movement that I grew up under in the nation, you couldn't tell who was what because everybody was so uniformed and cleaned up by the way that they moved. I've witnessed women who get disrespected out of their name and 100 men or 50 to 100 men show up that night. I've witnessed protocol to make sure, show up to address whatever situation has to be addressed. I was taught that a nation can rise no higher than its woman, so that's the bar that we judge nations on. That literally, no matter how great you are, how big you are, how rich you are, if it's destroying the woman, it means nothing. Well, I was taught under a culture that opens their doors, closes their doors, calls before they get to the house, make sure that there's a courting set up to make sure that she's respected, that men ain't disrespecting them in any kind of way. Showing up at homes to the abusive husband who beats up the woman. I also lived in shelters as with my mother due to domestic abuse and stuff as a child for a certain amount of time. But it was the movement that came and got us out of that house first before we made our way out here and helped take care of us. So under the unique culture, and when I say black Muslims, because there's a lot of things out here that took a different direction based off of some of the things that we didn't like, the way of mistreatment of women around the world. And so there was a unique setup for black people here that made sure that we treated ours and made them the standard, not just of the black community, but for the Islamic world, that no matter what's happening in that culture, whatever that Arabian brother's doing or whatever this and the other, that our woman had just came out of slavery, came out of hell. So to set her as the bar of respect, women leaders that I grew up under, women ministers. So for me, my marriage, everything that I do is based off of what I was taught in that regard, that a nation can rise no higher than its woman.
I think we live in like a very like physical world. We judge very much based on our appearances, what we have and things like that. And I think one of them, and specifically in the conversation between like men and women, is power, right? We're not as strong as men in the physical aspect. And I think that reflects a negative view on women and how we're being perceived throughout the world.
And in the West, empowerment means you can have sex with whoever you want, dress however you want, whenever you want. To us, that just wouldn't be empowerment.
Yeah.
So if you mean, however, to edify the female in terms of her virtue, in terms of her intelligence, her, again, I'll use the expression potential and capacity for spirituality, yes. The creation of the male and the female, in our scripture, they have the same essence. They're described as having the same essence, the same soul. But the male is not like the female. That's another expression, because that's obviously the case. You know, we have the same human value, but you're in a different vessel than I'm in. And as a consequence, the role that you play in the real world is different. But those differences are valued.
The idea that, you know, to be empowered, you have to be at the head of the church, or you have to be a pastor, you have to be, I'm sorry for my ignorance, but the head of the Muslim mosque. That's not true. We have two different types of empowerment. And that's where I think, like, you know, women are empowered to be somewhere that people now think is them being oppressed.
Right.
We've lost this idea that it's powerful to be a mother. Right. It's powerful to, you know, nurture these kids. And in the same aspects, you know, it's powerful to protect and provide. So when you come home and your wife is taking care of the kids and she didn't clean the bathroom, but you just came home from your job, don't look at her and be like, why didn't you clean the bathroom? Be like, you know what, actually, I'm gonna provide for you because you've been providing for me all day. I'm gonna go clean that bathroom because I love this God.
Right.
That I'm beneath, and he gave you me and these kids and blessed me. So you know what? I'm gonna provide for you because that's what God has called me to do. Those are two different types of empowerment.
I agree with some things I'm hearing, some things I don't agree with, but I want to tap on, like, because I think these examples are like domesticated examples, and I think that's great because, like, make a housewife out of me. But I also have seen great examples of women being called on assignment to preach, to evangelize, to do mighty things, and that being an empowerment that can only come from God. Even the church that I go to here in Los Angeles is called One LA, and our pastor, Pastor Teray Roberts, he preaches, but his wife also, Sarah Jakes Roberts, she preaches too, and Sarah can preach a house down, okay? So it's like, in that same way, we're empowered as women to be ambassadors before others for Christ as well. And I think that we play a role that allows us to be used by God to draw other people in our sensitive nature, that is empowering. And I think that touches on what Fab said concerning, like, Jesus really looking at us as his daughters. And like, anytime when I'm in any situation, like, I was blessed enough to have a really good dad. Like, my earthly father is like a really good father. And so when I'm ever in a bind and I'm thinking about, like, for instance, if I'm applying for a new job and they want to pay me less than what I think I should be paid, I think about, like, would my dad want me to get paid less than what I'm worth? Like, my earthly dad wouldn't want that. Now multiply that times 10,000. My heavenly father, there's no way he's wanting me to settle. There's no way he's wanting me to cheat myself. There's no way he's wanting me to take less than what I deserve. And so in that way, when I'm able to look at Jesus as my father, God as my father, our relation, that goes back to the relationship element of it being so much more intimate. And so I feel empowered every day by Jesus. I felt empowered to come here and speak because of Jesus. And so there's not a moment that I don't feel empowered to do things outside of myself that I naturally wouldn't do by the charge that Jesus Christ gives me.
At times, I have lost my faith.
Lost my faith. I'm gonna stay back.
Okay. I think it's just a natural human instinct, especially I'm someone who is big on just studying things and just trying to understand things. Like, this is, like, it's called a faith for a reason. It's called belief for a reason, because I don't think we were meant to be able to be like, that is 1,000% fact. We're given this thing, we're told to believe in it. It's like, this is a faith at the end of the day. And yeah, like, I'm a person who's very inquisitive, and I've had my moments where I'm like, dang, what's this, that. But I'm very grateful I've been brought back to God.
Yeah, for me, like, same, honestly. Like, I've been in and out, lost my faith, like, out of, like, you know, being a Muslim. Like, I was like, oh, you know, if I don't know if I believe in it, you know? So I just had to, like, read more of the Quran and, like, study and put myself back into it, because there's some times where like, oh, you know what, like, I just don't want to do this like, anymore. I was giving up on myself, like, but I think more being closer to like my family, like, talking to people, learning more about my religions, like I got more back into it, like wearing my hijab more. I was not doing a lot of that, like doing a lot of like bad things, like drinking, things like that, smoking, like a lot of things like that. I just had to like focus and put myself in like what matters, and that's Allah. He's number one. That's what I care about. That's like number one for me, then health and family and all of that.
Yeah. Just because we're going in the circle, I've never lost my faith that there was a God. I've never lost my faith that the God that I knew existed was the Christian God that I believe in. However, I have had things that have overstepped him. I've had idols in my life that I have put over him, whether it's school, baseball, relationships with women, anything like that. So when I say I lost my faith, I never thought that there was no God. But there is something that I worshipped instead of him. And there's nothing that you shall worship above him. And now, like, I'm here now. Thank the Lord. You know, I got baptized March, my junior year of college. And like, I'm almost on the verge of tears just about the grace that God gives you. Like, there's so much grace in what he gives you and how much he truly cares for you. Because he calls us his children. His children that he cares for. And that you just have a heavenly Father in this world. And I just think that, you know, losing your faith is a part of faith. You know, like there are trials and tribulations in your life that you'll face, just like failure is a part of success. I don't think that you can succeed entirely in your life until you have failed. And in the same way, you can't necessarily succeed in faith and fully understand what the gift that God has given you until you've fallen from glory. For all have fallen short of the glory of God, but they are redeemed by him who came, Jesus Christ. So.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that because I agree. I don't think there's ever been a moment where I've doubted Jesus Christ. Never. And that may be because I was raised, but also I had my own experience of discovering and understanding who he is for myself. And so in that, there's definitely been moments where it's like, dang God, you taking a long time to do this. I'm gonna go do what I want to do. Or like, dang, like this anxiety, this feeling of depression won't go away. Let me turn to a blunt. Let me turn to something else instead of me turning to God. I've had seasons where I've been there. And so I've never doubted Jesus. I think in a lot of ways, I prevented him from showing himself to be dependable in my life by jumping the gun and not waiting on him and not waiting on his perfect timing and not waiting for his perfect plan for my life. And I thank God for the kindness and the grace that he had for me during those seasons to still chase after me, to still pull me back to him, and to still show me that like I'm his child and that he cares for me and that there's nothing that I could ever do to make him not chase after me.
I piggybacking with what you guys said, like I agree. There's never been a moment where I doubted like the goodness of God. I mean, granted, were there times I had to wait a little longer than, you know, I've wanted to, of course, but I think what we need to do as Christians is be realistic about the walk, right? I mean, Jesus on the cross, he said, God, why have you forsaken me? He's not doubting the goodness of God, but I think it's just revealing to us the reality of the walk in nature. There's going to be times that, you know, we're you know, contemplating if this really is worth it, right? But you have to count the cost. And I think every time I, you know, walk in the purpose and the will of God, I see that it's worth it.
I wasn't a person who like woke up and like read the Bible or read the Quran and then was like, I believe, you know? So faith hit me differently, I think, because in life, I just was in my mother's wars, you know, and just the war of life, I caught on to a community that moved in ways throughout every community that I saw that ultimately it made things very real for me. Just like I understood the war we're in. So when I would go around people, I could see a lot where I'm like, man, people don't see what's going on. I got to see blatant lies, watch like the minister do a speech and then watch what the news would say in contrast, or talk about something that's happening out of the world or out of the country, and then see where the news doesn't even talk about that at all. So then at a certain point, my faith was built off of like kind of coming up in war. So then at a certain point, once I then started tapping into like scripture and stuff, and I'm reading, I didn't feel like I was reading it from like a history book. You know, I was taught in a way where if Genesis is yesterday and Revelation is tomorrow, then where you at in it? And you know, so once I activated, I felt like everything in this war, in this beautiful war, has enhanced my faith. But I think I also might have misunderstood the question too a little bit because I was high. So when you started bringing up other stuff about how you turned to this or turned to that, I'm like, well, maybe that did mean I was losing my faith if I was drunk at that point or smoking at that point or out there doing that. But I guess I didn't answer that way because it made sense to me that there's God. So I never lost faith in God. I could lose faith in myself sometimes.
I think for me, the season of life that I'm in, my wife and I, through a season of like wondering if we're gonna conceive, if the Lord is gonna allow us to have children, if He's gonna bless us to have kids. Like for us, that has challenged my faith more than anything that I've ever experienced in my life. To the point where, you know, my dad passed away 7 years ago, and I was the first call that his wife made when he died. And the moment I was on my way to church, I'll never forget, I was on my way to church on a Sunday morning. He passed away on a Sunday morning, and Sunday was always his like favorite day because he get to go to church, right? And I remember thinking immediately as soon as he passed, and I got that call, oh, this was the Lord's doing. Like I immediately thought that. And so I have more questions than I do answers in this season of life than I did when my dad died. My dad was my hero. I don't think I doubt God. I don't think currently, as I sit here today, I don't think I doubt His goodness. But I'd be lying if I say I haven't doubted His goodness. I'd be lying if I said I haven't questioned Him. I think I understand the difference between questioning Him and testing Him. I think He welcomes the questioning. Right. But I think He's like, yo, don't test me. You know?
That was a bar.
You know what I'm saying? So I think for me personally, where I stand today, I am in one of those seasons where I pray these things. I will see your goodness in the land of the living, but you got to help my unbelief. You got to help me get there. While I'm watching other people thrive in the land of the living, and I'm not, I need you to help me get there.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for your vulnerability.
Yeah. May God bless you.
Yeah, when I heard the question, I was thinking like the absence of belief. I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking in too simplified terms. What I'm hearing, if I'm hearing you all correctly, everyone gets weary, you know what I mean? I've boxed a little bit, and you know, you get beat up, you say, man, I don't know if I'm gonna win this fight. I mean, I think that's natural. My parents were in the Nation of Islam, and they made what we call now the transition under Imam W.D. Muhammad. And I was blessed to be his student. I studied Quran and scripture directly under him. And in terms of my acceptance with certainty of the truth of Islam, it's never changed. It just hasn't. Because I think that, and I think this was hinted at a moment ago, it becomes a way of perceiving reality in and of itself, let alone, I like the expression, walking with God. God lets you know if He's present in your life. And I experience God's presence every day at the level of just personal things, but at the level of understanding and perception. I think that's a graduation for me that makes it so real, So I've never doubted. And most of my weariness is because of people. I'm tired of these people. I was really impressed by you all's responses and you all's what you shared. But I think that how we have exchanged represents a maturity for our people. Because one of the things that I share with I'm an imam and a teacher in Islam.
We know.
Yeah.
Come on.
But one of the things that I share with them in connection with this whole thing about the black religious experience, the same things that motivated the soul of a Dr. King or any great figure in the history of our people, it was the same influences also pushed Malcolm to join the nation, pushed my parents to join the nation. It was the same set of influences, it just pushed them in two different directions. And I think the commonality that they had was that they both, these two sides, they were searching for answers, they were searching for liberation, they were searching for satisfaction for their soul. And historically, it has put us at odds with one another. You know what I mean? At least for a brief time period. But I think that we're maturing into a space where we are seeing each other. And I think what you captured it, I mean, perfectly in my mind. I mean, you're right. We used to go to my grandparents' house for Christmas, and they would get us gifts, and we would take them. Yeah. And not be
I ain't gonna deny a gift. You know,
they still, it's that respect in our community has existed, and I'm seeing it's present.
Honestly, it's beautiful to see a conversation that is, foundational on what you said earlier, peace and love, right? And I think when we continue to have conversations like this, I think it'll push the world to a better place.
Black Christian, Black Muslim, Black.
Yeah.